Hey folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. This is Travis. So today I want to talk about bugging out with a family, bug out plans with a family, and then do you really even need to bug out? I've kind of talked about that a few times on this channel, but I want to talk about bugging out with a family for a bit. Now, this idea for this video is kind of a response to another channel, a much larger channel than mine, Warrior Poets Society. And if you guys haven't checked them out, you really should. The guy's name is John Lovell. He's a ex-Army Ranger, and he's really smart, brilliant. Most of his videos are about, firearms and self-defense tactics, but he does have a lot of preparedness videos, a lot of just kind of philosophical type videos. He's, I think, a really good guy. I don't know him at all, but he has a huge channel, and just want to do a shout out for him. And so that watching one of his videos, he talked about this, and it kind of gave me some ideas. So bugging out. Now, for those of you that are single, don't have a spouse or children, maybe some of this won't apply to you. But even if you don't have any children, you may have children in your life, whether it be neighbors or extended family, nieces, nephews, cousins, things like that. So I think you can definitely learn something from this. Again, I am not an expert, just a little opinion. So the subject of bugging out, if you ever got to that point, if there was something that happened, the balloon goes up, whatever it is, that you feel the need, that now is the time to grab your stuff and go. Maybe you're, on the right step, the right train. You've got the bug out bag ready to go for you. You've got your equipment, maybe it's in your vehicle, maybe it's at the, closet in the front of the house or whatever. You've got it ready to go. What about the rest of your family? If you're married, is your wife or your husband, do they have their stuff? If you have kids, do they have bags? Are the things that's in those bags for them? You may have stuff for camping and bushcraft survival type stuff. You may have things for your weapons, ammunition, knives, hatchet, gun cleaning kit, anything like that that you want to put in there. But what about children? If you have a baby, you have diapers. If you're a woman or if you have a wife, maybe there's, certain hygiene products and things. Are those in there? Children, do you have certain things that kind of keep them occupied, little games, little things for them to do? These are things that sometimes we don't always think about. Excuse me. It's easy, and I'm kind of talking in a way just to the guys right now. It's easy for us guys to, whether we have past military law enforcement experience or not, to get all into that, tactical, cool backpack, cool gear, high speed this, harness and chest plates and carriers and all that kind of stuff, cool guns, cool, everything. You look like something that come out of a video game. But there's a reality to it. If, and there's kind of a big if, and I'll go into that later in the video, if you ever get to a point of whatever happens that you feel you need to leave your secured position, leave your home, and go somewhere else, you can't just go there by yourself. You have to take your family, obviously. And are they equipped to go? Do you have things for them? Because what they need is going to be different than what you need. Sure, there's basics like extra clothing and blankets and food and things like that, but there's also certain things that are specific to them. If you have an infant, do you have a plan on how to take that infant? What are you going to carry that infant in? Do you have, if you need formula, certain medications for that infant, diapers? Have you actually figured up, if you have a child in diapers, how many diapers that you go through in a day? How many diapers you would need to carry with you if you're planning on being gone for 3 to 5 days? These are other things that you would want to think about if bugging out is a plan that you have in place. Secondly, is sorry about the raspiness. I got some allergies going on. I've been drinking herbal teas and stuff, but it's got the, hear my Darth Vader voice. Kind of sound like TJ Morris. Anyways, so I apologize for all the clearing my throat. There's another aspect of bugging out, especially when you have family, is the psychological aspect. Is this something that you have talked to with your spouse? Is this something that you've talked to with your children? You know, your wife, your children, or your husband and your children. They may feel secure in their home. They like their home. They have their things. Children tend to become very attached easily to things more than adults do, although some adults do that. But children very much, they become very attached to things, you know, their security blanket, you know, their special stuffed animal, that sort of thing. Have you gone through in your head, played it out, the emotional trauma that it's going to be on them when you have to rip them away from your home with the possibility of never coming back, and the things that they're going to leave? What if you have pets? And I'm not talking about just a dog, because if you have the right kind of dog, you know, it might be good for you to bring the dog with you. What if you have one of them little, you know, ankle biter, rat-looking dogs? Probably not the best dog to be bringing out here in the woods if you're bugging out. What if you have a hamster, a gerbil, goldfish, you know, birds, ferrets, you know, those types of things? You're going to have to leave them behind. Have you thought about, you know, kind of what you're going to do and how you're going to handle that with your children? Aside from whatever reason that would cause you to bug out, that is traumatic on its own. And then the fact that you're going to have to convince your wife or your husband that now's the time, you know, now's the time to enact the plan. We've got to leave. And then taking your children and then ripping them away from everything that they hold dear, and then taking them wherever you've planned on going to. There's a lot of trauma going on there for a child. And so while it's hard to plan and train to avoid all of that trauma, you can't just set in the back of your mind like, well, you know, I've got this plan all up here and I've got some stuff in the garage for bags and bug out gear, but yet you've never explained that to your family. You've never talked to them about it. You've never shown them this stuff. They've never gone through any kind of evacuation scenario. And so what's going to happen is for whatever reason you need to bug out. It could just be the river's flooding, the dam broke, or the levee broke and your area's flooding, or there's a hurricane coming and you got to leave. It's going to be extremely traumatic for them. And while, you know, some might say, well, you know, they'll get over it, you know, people go through trauma like that. Yeah, if they have to, if they absolutely have to, if it meant life or death, you know, if it meant dying versus going through emotional trauma, sure, I would choose emotional trauma. But here's the thing. That's part of prepping, being prepared for that, being prepared for that emotional trauma, and doing what you can to talk to your children and your spouse to get them involved in that. You know, it's something that I talk to mine about. And you have to kind of do it, you know, depending on your child, the child's age, their maturity and all that. It's all depends. But we talk about things, you know. If something comes up in the news, you know, maybe there's hurricanes somewhere, or tornadoes, or snowstorms, you know, we kind of talk that out. You know, if that happened here, there's a possibility, you know, we might have to leave. We might have to leave our home. You know, if there was tornadoes coming or something, and we felt we had to leave, we would have to leave. And, you know, you understand that you might have to leave some of your things behind. We can't take everything. You know, we may not be able to take all the animals. And of course, you know, they might get sad and they are going to ask questions. And you can kind of answer them as best you can. And then maybe even go through some a little bit of training with them and try to make it fun, but also teach them that, you know, while we hope we never have to do this, it is a possibility. And I feel, from my experience with my children, that doing that type of thing with them can possibly, you know, lower the amount of trauma that they would go through in a situation where you had to leave the home. Because, you know, while us guys might look at it as like, it's our Rambo moment, man, we've been, playing video games. I don't play video games, but we've been, playing video games my whole life, ready for this moment, and they're not really thinking about the emotional side of it. And because, how us guys are, we're just not emotions, we're like all a bunch of Vulcans. But our children aren't, our spouses aren't. So part of that preparedness plan is doing what you can now to try to alleviate the stress and the trauma, and doing what you can now to prepare them mentally for it. You're never, ever going to prepare them mentally for everything that would happen and completely be prepared. But you certainly need to start doing that now, of talking with your children, going through some training, with them, little, we got to get our bags, we got to leave. And I, you don't have to necessarily train as if you're never going to return again, because in most situations you might be able to. Now, if it's apocalyptic, that might change that. But, if it's some type of natural disaster, there's chances are you're going to be able to come back to your home. And so, explaining them that, if the tornado's coming, we probably could come back afterwards. Even if the roof is missing off the house, or if it floods, the house might get flooded, but it's still going to be here. It'll be a mess, but we'll come back to it. But these are things that, especially with children, that you need to think about, and think about the things that they need. The things that they need along the way that maybe you don't need because you're a big, burly, tough man, but they're children. And so remember that when you're, developing and preparing their bug out gear, their bags, their go bags, whatever it is that you're preparing, because they're going to have different needs than you do. And, they don't, their needs maybe isn't, 6 more, mags of, whatever ammunition that you're carrying. Theirs may be different. It may be a certain teddy bear, or a certain game or something to keep their minds occupied. So this is something that a lot of times we forget, that we have to have provisions for these children, and then also that we need to do our best now to try to prepare them mentally and emotionally for it. I'm not talking about traumatizing them now, but just prepare them. I mean, they do this kind of stuff in schools and things, where they do fire drills and tornado drills. I mean, when I was a kid, we did, hide under the desks for, nukes coming over from Russia. I don't know how that was ever going to save us, but hey, that's another subject. Anyways, show my age. Which brings me, not the age, but the bug out bag, brings me to another subject. Do you really need to bug out? I've talked about this before many times, so I just wanted to hit on it again. It's not that I'm rehashing something. It's something that, you need to talk about. It needs to be something that you think of in your plan. It's going to be different for everybody, but not every scenario means you need to bug out. I'm of the opinion, my opinion, doesn't mean it's right. It probably isn't, and it may not be correct for many of you. But in my world, if I need to bug out, somewhere along the line, my plan has failed. Because my plan isn't to bug out. My plan is to bug in. My plan, that's why I live the way I do. I live at a place that's my bug out. And so if I have to leave here, then it means that myself or something outside of myself has failed within my preparedness plan. It doesn't mean that I would never bug out. It just means that it's going to get really bad before I choose that. That could be different for everyone. Maybe you don't, you live completely opposite of this. Maybe you live, in a townhouse apartment in downtown, wherever. And so bugging out's going to be maybe, higher up on your list. But the thing is that bugging out is always a dangerous thing to do. You're always vulnerable. You're leaving behind your supplies, your security, your home, and you're going out into the unknown. And especially after an SHTF, a big one happens, you never know what the unknown gives you. Like right now, if I just start walking off in those woods, I kind of have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to come across. I mean, there's some wild animals that could harm me, but I don't really worry about people bothering me if I'm walking around, unless I'm trespassing on someone's property. But after SHTF, well, you don't really know what you're going to come across out there, whether it's bad people or, you know, government that's, you know, rounding people up. You never know. So bugging out shouldn't be high up on your plan. And if it is, then maybe you don't live in the right place. Maybe you need to, you know, come out of her, my people. And, you know, I'm not saying that everyone needs to move out where I live, but I think all of you that are really wanting to survive and of the survivalist mindset, living deep in the city is not the best place to go. I'm always going to say that. Outside of the city, the edge of the city, out in the country, but the more you are in the city, the harder it's going to be for you to survive. Because you're most likely going to have to bug out to survive. And that right there is very dangerous. So make sure you have the right provisions for your family, for their age appropriate. Remember, you know, kids go through things, clothes and stuff. So, you know, what clothing do you have? Are you changing those out? If you have a baby, do you have the needs for that? Women in the family, do you have needs for them? Toys, you know, security blanket type stuff, toys, you know, stuffed animals that they need. Are those part of the plan? Have you gone over the plan with your children? Talk to them so that there's not this as much emotional trauma. And then in the end, you know, is bugging out really necessary? Is it for you? And you need to, you know, because you don't need to bug out. You shouldn't bug out if you don't need to bug out, because it could, you know, make things worse for you. So make sure that if bugging out is in your plan, that it's a good plan, but it's, you know, like a real backup to your backup plan. Because, you know, you should be living in a place now that you can survive in. And if you're not, then you should make that a higher priority. You should make it a higher priority to find a place to live that you can bug in than it is to just bug out. I know bugging out's kind of seems like the easier option, but you should really find a place to live that you can bug in comfortably at, and wherever that is. You know, just because I live in the Ozarks doesn't mean that's the only place. I know I talk a lot about it, but that's not the only place you can live like this, and you don't have to live quite as far out as I do. Anyways, I just wanted to excuse me, talk a little bit more about that. You know, like I said, the video idea came from John Lovell over at Warrior Poet Society, and he kind of was talking about it. Of course, he spun it in a funny way because he's a funny guy, but if you have never watched his videos on his channel, I encourage you to do it. Very professionally done, humongous channel compared to mine. But I think he's a really good guy. He comes across as someone that, you know, I think is a real straight shooter. So anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.